from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. We begin with devastating scenes out of Afghanistan. 2 explosions rocking Kabul, one at the airport, the other at a nearby hotel, killing 12 U.S. service members and many more Afghans. That death toll will undoubtedly climb. The area where the attacks took place was teeming with people trying to flee the country, as they have been for days. The United States is blaming militants from the Islamic State for these blasts and say more attacks are expected. This as the U.S. is continuing to try to withdraw forces from the country and get as many Americans out as they can, along with Afghans seeking refuge. We are expecting to hear from President Biden this hour. We're going to bring that to you live. But for now, I want to get a check of the markets and bring in our Kriti Gupta, who's been following the ups and downs of the day. The markets, Kriti, heading into the red as all of this was unfolding across trading hours. Talk to us about what you saw.
Absolutely. We'll start it off as a risk-off session to begin with, but a 0.5% move during the day as we heard about those explosions in Kabul. Really important to keep in mind here that the market has not been sensitive to these Afghan headlines. That is until today, and you really saw that the move going right into havens, going into the Bloomberg Dollar Index, going into gold as well. Those risk assets really taking a tumble, whether it was commodities or whether it was stocks. Right now, though, the market's really focusing on what's going to happen tomorrow, with Jackson Hole really becoming the prime focus. If you look at a terminal chart I have for you, really looking at the tapering story and whether or not tapering before rate hiking is really the way to go. Of course, that's really going to be the spotlight. Anything that Chairman Powell has to say, in addition to what has already been said by several Fed speakers today. I do want to bring it back to Afghanistan, though, because as far as today's market story goes, that really was the story. And you did see a lot of kind of risk-off sentiment broadly, but I really want to point out the fact that the market isn't anticipating any sort of longer-term conflict. And I can tell you that because of these kind of bottom 2 tickers at the bottom, really these defense ETFs that really house a lot of aerospace names, a lot of military-grade names. Well, they underperform those cybersecurity ETFs. So when it comes to national security, right now, it doesn't seem like those defense names are outperforming, and therefore it doesn't seem like the market is expecting this Afghanistan risk to really last much longer.
All right, Kriti, thanks so much for that update. I want to get straight to the White House, where our White House correspondent, Anne-Marie Horton, is standing by. Anne-Marie, we're waiting to hear from the president any moment now, but what's been unfolding in Kabul is really a nightmare scenario here. He had said earlier this week he would take it day by day. He had contingency plans. Is it time for those plans now?
It's a very difficult day, Emily, here at the White House, and our hearts and minds, of course, with those 12 service members and their families and their colleagues in Kabul. He had called for those contingency plans from the Pentagon, from the State Department. We'll have to wait to hear what the president says, but we did hear from the Pentagon, and what General McKenzie made clear was that the mission continues. They will continue to hunt down who did this. It was also quite interesting. And unfolding in this press conference from the Pentagon was the fact that how much the U.S. military is relying on the Taliban on these outside checkpoints. He says, though, these threats remain very, very active. So they are still worried about potentially more threats outside of the Kabul airport as they continue to try to get this evacuation done by August 31st.
As you said, those evacuations continuing as well, according to the Pentagon, trying to get as many people out as possible. And yet, Anne-Marie, President Biden himself warned that this might happen 2 days ago, even last night, warnings from the U.S. Embassy and other embassies about possible explosions. There have to be people asking, why wasn't this avoided?
It's a very great question. And when you ask U.S. officials this, they continually say, when the mission is done, there will be a massive hot wash in terms of a debrief on what exactly happened. All of this really stems from the fact that they did not think the Taliban would take Kabul, the capital of the country, even though a week before we had seen the Taliban really taking over parts of the country, especially in the west and the northern parts of the country. They did not think the capital itself and Ashraf Ghani and his government would absolutely collapse in the just expedient fashion that it did. So right now you're in a situation where the U.S. military just really has control of this airport. There's only one runway at this airport. as opposed to if we had Bagram Air Base, which is about an hour north of the Kabul airport. So there's going to be a lot of questions about why this evacuation was so frantic, so chaotic, and the fact that we did put U.S. service members in harm's way. And you see that today with these tragic 12 deaths. But now the U.S. says the mission has to continue. They're going to do everything they can to get those people out. We have an estimate about 1,000 Americans still remain in Afghanistan, but then there's just thousands, really, of those Afghans that either fought alongside Americans during the 20 years or are seeking refuge based on humanitarian issues.
All right, this is an hour-by-hour, minute-by-minute situation, and we are again awaiting President Biden any minute now to speak. Bloomberg's Emery Horder. And Emery, thanks so much for that update. We'll be with you again as news unfolds. Again, still waiting to hear from the president. He could start speaking at any moment. But just to recap, the death toll from those deadly attacks in Kabul, and especially at the airport, shows the level of desperation of Afghans trying to flee their country. Airbnb is joining the efforts to help those refugees fleeing. The company announced earlier this week that they'll house 20,000 refugees temporarily, free of charge. Senior Vice President of Policy and Communications, Chris Lehane, with us now. And Chris, you've also announced that now anyone, any host, anyone who wants to be part of this effort can open their homes for free. But I have to start with the folks who are still stuck in the country. You worked in the White House. You are a policy and communications expert. What are President Biden's options right now? What do you imagine is happening behind the scenes?
Well, just looking at those images that you were just showing, it's really searing. And obviously, everyone's thoughts and hearts and minds are the U.S. military personnel, their families, the Afghanis, who were obviously really hurt in this incident. And look, you're right. I've been in the White House and been in the building when there have been situations analogous to this. And I just know that each and every one of those folks there in the building are feeling this and thinking about it. And I think what this afternoon demonstrates, or this morning Afghan time, is just really how dire the situation is, how precarious it is. Our role here is really to help support folks when they come out. From what we have seen and from the contacts and the communications, the Biden administration, the U.S. government, those people who are on the front lines are doing an amazing job of getting people out of there in really a record time. And if you think about that hierarchy of needs, obviously physical safety by far the most important. And then after that, it is food and shelter. And the role that we're really seeking to play and to support is to help, as you noted, to provide that shelter for those folks who are getting out of there and able to get out of there.
So Airbnb is waiving fees on all refugee stays. Brian Chesky is personally helping with this effort. How much demand have you had to help so far? And how many have you spoken to who need help?
It's, it's starting off as a trickle in terms of people getting out of Afghanistan. It's going to become a stream, and we anticipate it ultimately becoming a flood. We've committed between Airbnb and Airbnb.org, our philanthropy, to covering the cost to make sure we can house 20,000 of the folks who we anticipate coming out of Afghanistan. But since we made that announcement, there's been just really an outpouring of support from around the world. People who want to support the party of humanity, offering their help, host offering to open up their homes for free, other people offering to donate finances to actually help support even more people in terms of providing that housing. And so as of today, really as of this weekend, we had housed about 200, a little bit over 200 folks who are really part of that first trickle coming out of Afghanistan. But our role here, as I said, really is what are the infrastructure to make that housing possible. And, we've been at this for about 10 years. We've built this muscle, and we really do have the infrastructure capacity to be able to provide this housing, whether it's in the United States or whether it's really around the world. And just as a little bit of an analogy here, we've been supporting refugee work, as I said, for about 10 years. But, in the height of the pandemic, and I think you and I talked about this maybe a year or so ago, we've helped provide housing for tens of thousands of frontline responders during the middle of the pandemic when they needed to be on the front lines near hospitals and emergency centers. And that really sort of helped us understand that we could scale at a pretty significant level. We ultimately ended up providing around 250,000 nights, meaning people staying at a night in an Airbnb as part of that frontline responder program. And so that really has served as the model for us to be able to understand and recognize and develop the infrastructure to be able to scale this type of work. And obviously it's a terrible, terrible situation in terms of what's going on in Afghanistan. But we are here to help provide that infrastructure, to provide that support.
Airbnb has hosted refugees from Iraq, from Syria, from Venezuela, from various natural disasters, and often where these folks end up is where they end up living for the rest of their lives. What have you learned about how big and broad the need is? And if folks want to sign up, what do they need to know?
So first of all, if you want to sign up, please go to airbnb.org/refugee, airbnb.org/refugee. As I've said, we've had thousands and thousands of people reach out offering to open up their homes, to give money. I even had someone who reached out to us today who's a musician who wants to create a song, professional musician who wants to create a song dedicated to the refugees, have all the revenue go to the refugees. So just a little bit of a sign of how people are thinking about this. And you mentioned our history, and it reminded me of one of our hosts who's here in California, Susan Bailey. And Susan opened up her home in 2016, actually, to an Iraqi refugee. And when that refugee got here, it was the same weekend that the Super Bowl was taking place. And she brought her whole neighborhood together, and they sat there and watched the Super Bowl, introduced themselves to this refugee who ultimately went on to become one of their neighbors and a member of their community. And so, look at our aspiration here in terms of making these Airbnb homes available to this wave of refugees who are going to be coming is both to make sure we're providing them that temporary shelter that they need immediately, a couple of weeks as they transition into the US. But because Airbnbs are actually in neighborhoods, it does serve as a way for them to transition into what will be the next chapter in their lives and their families' lives. And so for us, this is not just the first couple of weeks. This is really a long-term commitment by us and really by our entire community.
Now, I just want to recap the news. These two deadly explosions in Kabul, 12 Americans killed, dozens of Afghans killed. Chris, when I think about just the images of desperation over the last few days, the people falling from planes, the speed at which the Taliban took over, putting on your White House hat, your policy hat, was President Biden right to pull out when he did? Is he right to be sticking to this August 31st deadline? Should that deadline be moved up at this point?
Yeah, again, I appreciate the question. And obviously, I think like all of us, we're following this, hour by hour. What we have seen, from our end in terms of our work with the administration is that, those folks on the ground in Kabul and really throughout the US government, are doing a pretty amazing job in a really difficult situation of getting people out in what by any objective analysis is really record time. Again, our role here is to help provide that housing, to help support what the US government and others are doing. There's a bunch of nonprofits who are participating in this. The IRC, various religious faith-based organizations are helping. And again, we're all watching this. I think we all appreciate what is going on. And I would say, trying to look for the positives, the fact that we've had so many people who do want to help, who do want to reach their hands out, who do want to open up their homes, who do want to find a way to actually play a concrete role to help these folks. I am taking that as a positive in what is otherwise obviously a really challenging situation.
Airbnb.org/refugee and other companies have been inspired by what you're doing. Hims and Hers, the telehealth platform offering 10,000 free health appointments. Chris Lehane, Senior Vice President of Policy and Communications, formerly at the White House, thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us. We're continuing now to wait for President Biden at the White House. He will have remarks on the attacks we have seen unfold today in Afghanistan. We're going to bring that to you live. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg. You're looking at live pictures from the White House. We are waiting for President Biden to speak about these two deadly explosions that have happened in Kabul today. The United States continuing the evacuation efforts as fast as possible, even as these terror threats remain. We're going to bring you President Biden as soon as he takes the podium there. Meantime, I want to turn to some of the earnings of the day. Peloton tumbling after hours after the fitness company released a worse than expected outlook for the 2022 fiscal year. Investors reacting to an announcement from the company that it is cutting the price of its bike by $400. Good news for customers, but Peloton says it'll take a toll on sales and profit in coming months. And we're going to get more details on that when I speak exclusively with Peloton CEO John Foley tomorrow morning. Catch that interview 11 a.m. Wall Street time, 8 a.m. right here on the West Coast. And sticking with earnings that have been rolling out over the last couple of weeks, dating app Bumble giving an optimistic outlook for revenue this quarter, buoyed by expectations that users will continue to make that first move and prospective daters will respond in kind amidst continued uncertainty around the surge in COVID cases. Even so, Bumble has benefited from increasing vaccination rates and reopenings around the world. The return of in-person socializing has spurred users to spend more on dating subscriptions and in-app purchases. I want to bring in Bumble CEO Whitney Wolfe Herd for more. Whitney, thank you so much for joining us. So, obviously the pandemic is dragging on, restrictions going up, coming down in fits and starts. How is this impacting the activity you're seeing on the app, and what kind of a dating scene do you expect to see this fall?
Yeah, great to see you. So it's really fascinating. Despite the challenges that the world's been facing with Delta, we've continued to see very positive trends across our platform. So we've referenced this before, even in some of the most affected markets. For example, in Q2, we saw increasing engagement and activity, even with the spread of Delta in India. And the Bumble app monthly active users grew at over 60% year over year in that market during that time. So that just suggests that as loneliness climbs, as people go through devastating chapters, the need to connect and the need to find relationships does not disappear. The demand stays. And we become the only outlet, right? When you can no longer go out and meet people in person. So, we continue to gain share and maintain download share in most of our major markets, even throughout this COVID crisis. And we're really looking to the future now. We've seen a lot of silver lining through this chapter as far as what people want out of their relationship goes. And we have seen this intentionality spike. People are now really looking for specific relationships and they want to find them quickly and safely. So even as the world goes back to, call it normal, people will still come to our products first to meet in a digital safe capacity, to vet the person, to understand who's on the other side of the screen, and then go meet in real life. So we really do see strong results on either side of this COVID scenario. And despite these challenges, we've seen these positive trends.
Now, speaking of friends, look, it's dating in general can be tough. Dating in a pandemic, even tougher. And the dating app scene can be frustrating. Some people, they see the same guys on different apps. They're tired of making the first move and the conversation fizzling or not getting a response at all. What do you have to say to the people who are wondering, why should I pay for Bumble if I'm not having luck?
Well, this is the easiest, safest way to meet people. Going out to a bar and sitting around and waiting for somebody to walk by, this is outdated. And candidly, the luck in that category is very low. We have so many options. You can adjust your filters, you can adjust your settings, you can travel on our products. So even if you're not having luck in a particular moment, in a particular town, in a particular range of settings, you have this remarkable optionality to change what you're looking for. And so we've heard of countless stories of someone who hasn't found what they're looking for. Then they go into their intentional features and they say, I want someone of this religion. I want someone that's only looking for something serious. And I want someone that is, only a social drinker and doesn't want something in the future. They can be so particular about what they're looking for. And then boom, that person they're looking for falls into their lap. And you don't have that option in real life. You cannot customize the person you want to meet out in the real world. And so technology and Bumble and our products give you this incredible opportunity to take control of what you are looking for and to find it.
Now, you've been doing some really innovative things when it comes to employee wellness. You decided to give everyone a week off at the same time rather than giving them more days off that they could take whenever they wanted to. And other companies have followed you in doing this. What have you learned from this reset week, if you will? And are we going to see this every year?
Yes, absolutely. So we decided to give everybody the week off together so that there was no anxiety about feeling like you're not responding to somebody, or that when you come back, you're buried under a week's worth of work that you've missed amongst your team. And so by shutting it all off for everyone, our business is doing phenomenally well. And we're very fortunate to have such an incredible team that really hits their goals and makes sure that everything is buttoned up. And when you give enough heads up, we're going to take this week off. In 2 months from now, everyone can go out with peace of mind and they can actually go away and actually get offline. Burnout is real, Zoom fatigue is real. And by allowing everyone to step back and come back refreshed and invigorated, it did wonders for our team. And it was so well received that we're actually doing this now twice a year. And so there will be 2 weeks every single year that the whole company goes off. And for the naysayers out there wondering, how do you keep the lights on? We're a very sophisticated team. We plan ahead, and this is how you keep the lights on, by keeping your team feeling well and keeping them healthy, both mentally and physically.
All right, Whitney Wolfe Herd, CEO and founder of Bumble. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. It sounds like a really great experiment that yielded some good results. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. We're gonna have much more ahead. As we head to break, it was another successful mission for Blue Origin, the New Shepard rocket blasting off on the 17th mission from West Texas. The purpose of the mission, to conduct moon landing tests for NASA. Unlike the last launch that propelled Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos into space with 3 others, this one was unmanned. The top of the capsule was decorated with pictures of a Ghanaian artist and his family. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. We're going to take you to the White House, where President Biden has just taken the podium. Let's listen in.
This evening in Kabul, as you all know, terrorists attacked that we've been talking about and worried about, that the intelligence community has assessed, has undertaken an attack by a group known as ISIS-K. Took the lives of American service members standing guard at the airport and wounded several others seriously. He had also wounded a number of civilians, and civilians were killed as well. I've been engaged all day in constant contact with the military commanders here in Washington, the Pentagon, as well as in Afghanistan and Doha. And my commanders here in Washington in the field have been on this with great detail, and you've had a chance to speak to some so far. The situation on the ground is still evolving, and I'm constantly being updated. These American service members who gave their lives, it's an overused word, but it's totally appropriate here, we're heroes. Heroes who've been engaged in a dangerous, selfless mission to save the lives of others. They're a part of an airlift, an evacuation effort unlike any seen in history, with more than 100,000 American citizens, American partners, Afghans who helped us, and others taken to safety in the last 11 days. Just in the last 12 hours or so, another 7,000 have gotten out. They were part of the bravest, most capable, the most selfless military on the face of the earth. And they're part of simply what I call the backbone of America. They're the spine of America, the best the country has to offer. Jill and I, our hearts ache, like I'm sure all of you do as well, for all those Afghan families who lost loved ones, including small children, or have been wounded in this vicious attack. And we're outraged as well as heartbroken. Being the father of an Army major who served for a year in Iraq, and before that was in Kosovo as a U.S. attorney for the better part of 6 months in the middle of a war. When he came home after a year in Iraq was diagnosed, like many, many coming home, with an aggressive and lethal cancer of the brain. We lost. We have some sense, like many of you do, what the families of these brave heroes are feeling today. You get this feeling like you're being sucked into a black hole in the middle of your chest. There's no way out. My heart aches for you. But I know this. We have a continuing obligation, a sacred obligation to all of you, the families of those heroes. That obligation is not temporary, it lasts forever. The lives we lost today were lives given in the service of liberty, the service of security, in the service of others, in the service of America. Like their fellow brothers and sisters in arms who died defending our vision and our values in the struggle against terrorism, of the fallen this day, they're part of a great and noble company of American heroes. To those who carried out this attack, as well as anyone who wishes America harm, know this: we will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay. I will defend our interests and our people with every measure at my command. Over the past few weeks, I know many of you are probably tired of hearing me say it, we've been made aware by our intelligence community that the ISIS-K, an arch enemy of the Taliban, people who were freed when both those prisons were opened, has been planning a complex set of attacks on the United States personnel and others. This is why, from the outset, I've repeatedly said this mission was extraordinarily dangerous, and why I've been so determined to limit the duration of this mission. As General McKenzie said, this is why our mission was designed, this is the way it was designed to operate. Operating under severe stress and attack. We've known that from the beginning. And as I've been in constant contact with our senior military leaders, and I mean constant, round the clock, and our commanders on the ground and throughout the day, they made it clear that we can and we must complete this mission, and we will. And that's what I've ordered them to do. We will not be deterred by terrorists. We will not let them stop our mission. We will continue the evacuation. I've also ordered my commanders to develop operational plans to strike ISIS-K assets, leadership, and facilities. We will respond with force and precision at our time, at the place we choose, in a moment of our choosing. Here's what you need to know. These ISIS terrorists will not win. We will rescue the Americans there. We will get our Afghan allies out, and our mission will go on. America will not be intimidated, and I have the utmost confidence in our brave service members who continue to execute this mission with courage and honor to save lives and get Americans, our partners, our Afghan allies out of Afghanistan. Every day when I talk to our commanders, I ask them what they need. What more do they need, if anything, to get the job done? As they will tell you, I granted every request. I reiterated to them today on 3 occasions that they should take the maximum steps necessary to protect our forces on the ground in Kabul. And I also want to thank the Secretary of Defense and the military leadership of the Pentagon and all the commanders in the field. There has been complete unanimity from every commander on the objectives of this mission and the best way to achieve those objectives. Those who have served through the ages have drawn inspiration from the book of Isaiah, when the Lord says, "Whom shall I send? Who shall go for us?" The American military has been answering for a long time. Here I am, Lord, send me. Here I am, send me. Each one of these women and men of our armed forces are the heirs of that tradition of sacrifice, of volunteering to go in harm's way, to risk everything, not for glory, not for profit, but to defend what we love and the people we love. And I ask that you join me now in a moment of silence for all those in uniform and out of uniform, military and civilian, who have given the last full measure of devotion. Thank you. May God bless you all, and may God protect the troops and all those standing watch for America. We have so much to do. It's within our capacity to do it. We just have to remain steadfast. Steadfast. We will complete our mission, and we will continue after our troops have withdrawn to find means by which we can find any American who wishes to get out of Afghanistan. We will find them and we will get them out. Ladies and gentlemen, they gave me a list here. The first person I was instructed to call on was Kelly O'Donnell of NBC.
You have said leaving Afghanistan is in the national interest of the United States. After today's attack, do you believe you will authorize additional forces to respond to that attack inside Afghanistan? And are you prepared to add additional forces to protect those Americans who remain on the ground carrying out the evacuation operation?
I've instructed the military, whatever they need, if they need additional force, I will grant it. But the military, from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the commanders in the field, have all contacted me one way or another, usually by letter, saying they subscribe to the mission as designed to get as many people out as we can within the time frame that is allotted. That is the best way, they believe, to get as many Americans out as possible and others. And with regard to finding, tracking down the ISIS leaders who ordered this, we have some reason to believe we know who they are, not certain, and we will find ways of our choosing without large military operations to get them wherever they are. Trevor, Reuters.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's been some criticism, even from people in your party, about the dependence on the Taliban to secure the perimeter of the airport. Do you feel like there was a mistake made in that regard?
No, I don't. Look, I think General McKenzie handled this question very well. The fact is that we're in a situation, we inherited a situation, particularly since, as we all know, that the Afghan military collapsed 11 days before, in 11 days, that it is in the interest of, as McKenzie said, in the interest of the Taliban, that, in fact, ISIS-K does not metastasize beyond what it is, number one. And number two, it's in their interest that we are able to leave on time, on target. As a consequence of that, the major things we've asked them, moving back the perimeter, giving more space between the wall, stopping vehicles from coming through, etc., searching people coming through. It is not what you'd call a tightly commanded, regimented operation like the U.S. is, the military is, but they're acting in their interest. And so, by and large, and I've asked the same question to military on the ground, whether or not it's a useful exercise. No one trusts them. We're just counting on their self-interest to continue to generate their activities. And it's in their self-interest that we leave when we said, and that we get as many people out as we can. Like I said, even in the midst of everything happened today, over 7,000 people we've gotten out, over 5,000 Americans over. So it's not a matter of trust, it's a matter of mutual self-interest. And, but there is no evidence thus far that I've been given as a consequence by any of our commanders in the field that there has been collusion between the Taliban and ISIS in carrying out what happened today, both in front of the hotel and what is expected to continue for beyond today. Amir, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. You have spoken, again, powerfully about your own son and the weight of these decisions. With that in mind, and also what you've said, that the longer we stay, the more likelihood that there would be a major attack. How do you weigh staying even one more day, considering what's happened?
Because I think what America says matters. What we say we're going to do in the context in which we say we're going to do it, that we do it, unless something exceptional changes. There are additional American citizens. There are additional green card holders. There are additional personnel of our allies. There are additional SIV card holders. There are additional Afghans that have helped us. And there are additional groups of individuals that have been contacted us, from women's groups to NGOs and others, who have expressly indicated they want to get out and have gathered in certain circumstances in groups, on buses and other means. That still presents the opportunity for, in the next several days between now and the 31st, to be able to get them out. And our military, and I believe, to the extent that we can do that, knowing the threat, knowing that we may very well have another attack, the military has concluded that's what we should do. I think they're right. I think they're correct. And after that, we're going to be in a circumstance where will be, I believe, numerous opportunities to continue to provide access for additional persons to get out of Afghanistan, either through means that we provide and or are provided through in cooperation with the Taliban. They're not good guys, the Taliban. We're not suggesting that at all. But they have keen interest. As many of you have been reporting, they very much would like to figure out how to keep the airport open. They don't have the capacity to do it. They very much are trying to figure out whether or not they can maintain what is the portion of an economy that has become not robust, but fundamentally different than it had been. And so there's a lot of reasons why they have reached out, not just to us, but to others, as to why it would be continued in their interest to get more of the personnel we want to get out. We can locate them. Now, there's not many left that we can assess that want to come out. There's some Americans we've identified, we've contacted the vast majority of them, not all of them, who don't want to leave because they're dual nationals, they have extended families, et cetera. And there's others who are looking for the time. So that's why we continue. I'll take a few more questions, but you, sir.
I wanted to ask you,
okay.
You say that what America says matters. What do you say to the Afghans who helped troops who may not be able to get out by August 31st?
I say we're going to continue to try to get you out. It matters. Look, I know of no conflict as a student of history, no conflict where when a war was ending, one side was able to guarantee that everyone they wanted to be extracted from that country would get out. And think about it, folks. I think it's important. I know the American people get this in their gut. There are, I would argue, millions of Afghani citizens who are not Taliban, who did not actively cooperate with us as SIVs, who, if given a chance, they'd be on board a plane tomorrow. It sounds ridiculous, but the vast majority of people in communities like that want to come to America, given a choice. So getting every single person out can't be guaranteed by anybody because there's a determination all who wants to get out as well. At any rate, it's a process. I was really pointing to you, but you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are reports that U.S. officials provided the Taliban with names of Americans and Afghan officials to evacuate. Were you aware of that? Did that happen? And then, sir, did you personally reject a recommendation to hold or to recapture Bagram Air Force Base?
Here's what I've done let's answer the last question first. On the tactical questions of how to conduct an evacuation or a war, I gather up all the major military personnel that are in Afghanistan, the commanders, as well as the Pentagon. And I ask for their best military judgment. What would be the most efficient way to accomplish the mission? They concluded, the military, that Bagram was not much value added, that it was much wiser to focus on Kabul. And so I followed that recommendation. With regard to, there are certain circumstances where we've gotten information, and quite frankly, sometimes from some of you, saying you know of such and such a group of people are trying to get out, and they're on a bus, they're moving from other people. And this is their location. And there have been occasions when our military has contacted their military counterparts in the Taliban and said, this, for example, this bus is coming through with X number of people on it, made up of the following group of people. We want you to let that bus or that group through. So yes, there have been occasions like that. And to the best of my knowledge, in those cases, the bulk of that has occurred, they've been let through. But I can't tell you with any certitude that there's actually been a list of names. I know there may have been, but I know of no circumstance. It doesn't mean it didn't exist. That here's the names of 12 people, they're coming, let them through. It could very well have happened. I'll take one more question. Wait. Let me take the one question from the most interesting guy that I know in the press. That's you.
Mr. President, there had not been a U.S. service member killed in combat in Afghanistan since February of 2020. You set a deadline, you pulled troops out, you sent troops back in, and now 12 Marines are dead. You said the buck stops with you. Do you bear any responsibility for the way that things have unfolded in the last 2 weeks?
I bear responsibility for fundamentally all that's happened of late. But here's the deal. You know, I wish you'd one day say these things. You know as well as I do that the former president made a deal with the Taliban that he would get all American forces out of Afghanistan by May 1. In return, the commitment was made, and that was a year before. In return, he was given a commitment that the Taliban would continue to attack others, but would not attack any American forces. Remember that? I'm being serious. No, I'm asking you a question. Because before... No, wait a minute. I'm asking you a question. Is that accurate, the best of your knowledge? What?
Do you think that people have an issue with pulling out of Afghanistan or just the way that things have happened?
I think they have an issue that people are likely to get hurt. Some, as we've seen, have gotten killed, and that it is messy. The reason why, whether my friend will acknowledge it or has reported it, the reason why there were no attacks on Americans, as you said, from the date until I came into office, was because the commitment was made by President Trump. I will be out by May 1st. In the meantime, you agree not to attack any Americans. That was the deal. That's why no American was attacked.
A few days ago, you said you squarely stand by your decision to pull out.
Yes, I do, because look at it this way, folks, and I have another meeting for real. But imagine where we'd be if I had indicated on May the 1st I was not going to renegotiate an evacuation date. We were going to stay there. I'd have only one alternative: pour thousands of more troops back into Afghanistan to fight a war that we had already won relative to why the reason we went in the first place. I have never been of the view that we should be sacrificing American lives to try to establish a democratic government in Afghanistan, a country that has never once in its entire history been a united country and is made up, I don't mean this in a derogatory, made up of different tribes who have never, ever gotten along with one another. And so, as I said before, and this is the last comment I'll make, we'll have more chance to talk about this, unfortunately, beyond, because we're not out yet. If Osama bin Laden, as well as al-Qaeda, had chosen to launch an attack when they left Saudi Arabia out of Yemen, would we have ever gone to Afghanistan? Even though the Taliban completely controlled Afghanistan at the time, would we have ever gone? I know it's not fair to ask you questions, it's rhetorical, but raise your hand if you think we should have gone and given up thousands of lives and tens of thousands of wounded. Our interest in going was to prevent al-Qaeda from reemerging, first to get bin Laden, wipe out al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, prevent that from happening again. As I've said 100 times, terrorism is metastasized around the world. We have greater threats coming out of other countries, a heck of a lot closer to the United States. We don't have military encampments there. We don't keep people there. We have over-the-horizon capability to keep them from going after us. Ladies and gentlemen, it was time to end a 20-year war. Thank you so much.
President Biden there definitively saying he will send additional U.S. forces to Afghanistan if they are needed. The president saying the U.S. will not be deterred by terrorists, will not be intimidated, but that we will respond with force and precision, quote unquote, in kind. Quote unquote, he said, we will hunt you down. I want to bring in Bill Roggio, editor of the Long War Journal, and our Washington correspondent, Anne-Marie Horton. Anne-Marie, underscore the significance for us of what the president just said.
Well, it's quite an emotional speech, but also one that was very tough as well. I think his quote when he said we're outraged as well as heartbroken really got the mood of the tone that the president was trying to convey. He was talking about his son, Beau, and how the weight of these decisions he understands from a personal perspective. But then, as you just outlined there, Emily, saying we will hunt you down. He was talking directly to what his intelligence community, what they assess is that these two explosives and these terrorist attacks outside of Kabul airport were done by ISIS-K, and that's what he was referring to. We didn't hear anything in terms of extension of the withdrawal date, so it seems that they are still working on trying to get everyone out by August 31st.
Right, those evacuations happening still as we speak. The president saying we will find the ISIS leaders wherever they are. There's no evidence so far that they have colluded with the Taliban. But Bill, I want to ask you, does what the president say help explain at all what we've seen so far from this exit, from what is America's longest war, which is still going on?
Yes, it's, look, his focus on ISIS-K, the president has basically relied on a terrorist group that uses suicide tactics, that's the Taliban, to protect American citizens in Kabul from another group that uses suicide tactics, the Islamic State. If the president keeps saying that he's depending on the Taliban to provide security, then he says he doesn't trust them. This is madness. We shouldn't be surprised that something like this happened. It really was a matter of time. The entire situation was put into effect here when how the president decided to withdraw, how the withdrawal was implemented, how they refused to recognize the collapse of the Afghan government, and using Kabul as a choke point with 4.5 million people, with an airport in the heart of the city. This was destined to happen. The president doesn't have an answer for all of that. He's deflecting. He sticks with talking points like it's time to end the endless wars, but he ignores the fact of the Taliban-Al-Qaeda relationship, which endures. We're literally relying on a terrorist group.
In your view, is this war not going to end?
No, this war won't end. It's just
this
this phase of the war. It's just this phase of the war. The U.S. involvement in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda and the Al-Qaeda Taliban, the Islamic State is a minor player in Afghanistan. It has outsized effects, but the real problem here is the Taliban-Al-Qaeda relationship. You just had a Taliban spokesman tell us that that Osama bin Laden didn't conduct 9/11. So, this is what we're dealing with the Taliban.
All right. Well, certainly much more to continue to follow. Bill Roggio there, editor of the Long War Journal. Our Anne-Marie Horton, who's at the White House, will continue to keep us posted on more developments as they unfold. Stay with Bloomberg Television. I'm Emily Cheng in San Francisco. We're going to have John Foley, the CEO of Peloton, joining us exclusively tomorrow. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.